Hi, so can anxiety be trained and untrained in the brain? The answer is yes, so that's what we will be talking about in today's video. More specifically, we will be talking about neuroplasticity, how anxiety works in the brain, how the environment helps to build up anxiety, and also some tips for you to deal with anxiety in a better way. Okay, so what is neuroplasticity? You probably have heard about this. This has become a kind of a buzzword, at least in my world. What it means is that basically your brain has the ability to change over time. So just like a muscle, in whatever way you use it more often, you're going to be strengthening that movement, that ability. So let's have an example that if you think negatively about things, the neural pathways that you're using to think in those terms are actually going to be stronger. So the probability of you to think negatively the next time you encounter something is higher. The same happens with other ways of thinking and with other kinds of behavior. So let's say that you usually are motivated to wake up early and go out on a run. If you do that more often, the neural pathways that help you to do that are going to be strengthened. So the next time, after 20 times you do that, your brain is not going to create any resistance because it has become used to do that. So the way that anxiety works in the brain is pretty much the same thing. When you start having anxious thoughts, you're actually strengthening that process in your brain. So let's say anxiety actually serves a purpose. In a healthy measure, anxiety helps us to become alert and to tackle the challenges in our environment in a fast and efficient way. So when there is a threat and we have a response in our body, there are even physical signs of that being that response taking place. So for example, your muscles can contract, your mouth becomes drier, your heartbeat becomes faster. Those are all signs that your body is becoming ready to take on a threat. But what happens is that in our society, we still have lots of those responses as if we were meeting some kind of lion in the savannah. We are still having those kinds of, primitive responses in our brain, even though the threats that we are perceiving in our environment are pretty much unreal. So for example, there's this fear of speaking in public, and you might feel exactly the same kind of symptoms or signals that I have mentioned, like having the dry mouth or the heart beating faster. But there is no threat except if no one actually likes your talk, and that could impact your level of status in the tribe, and that's well. But basically what happens is that when we have this kind of response as if we are dealing with a threat, when we have this kind of response over and over and over again, we start to get extremely affected by this kind of physical reaction. And because we are physically affected, we actually aren't able to perform in the same way. So that will fuel the cycle, because then you don't perform as well as you could. So you will perceive the next challenge as another threat. And then you don't perform as well. And then you see how it becomes a cycle. So it is important to kind of find a way to break this cycle so that you can retrain your brain that the threats that it is perceiving, they are actually not real, and that your system can relax in the face of those events because they are not a threat. So there are ways to do that. Some practical tips for you to handle this kind of response. So first of all, it's actually important that you create a calm environment around you. And sometimes we are completely unaware of the things that are overstimulating us. So if maybe you are one of those people that can't have silence, can't deal with silence. Maybe you like to have the TV on all the time, or you never set your phone to silent mode because you actually enjoy having lots of notifications. That is actually creating this kind of stimulation around you, and your body, your brain might perceive it as too much. So it might actually be fueling this perception in your brain that there's a lot in the environment to handle, and in all these things there might come a threat that you're not going to be able to handle because it's just too much, and you might be distracted and you might not be ready to respond. So it is important to have a calm environment around you, at least for certain times of the day, so that you can give your body this kind of rest, that there's no threat in the environment, nothing is going to happen, there's nothing to worry about, everything is under control. So one fun fact about this is that the reason why we feel so good when we go to the top of a mountain or when we go to a walk on the beach is because when we look around and there's all this space, we understand, or at least our brain understands, that there aren't any threats around, because if there was a threat, you could see it from far away. So it can relax in an environment like that. But when we are in an apartment or when we are in a crowded place, the brain is very much more in an alert state, because it understands that a threat can come from any side and you will have to be ready to handle it. So you see that even if you're not consciously thinking about threats, your brain is scanning everything, looking for them. So the same goes for a very cluttered environment. There's a lot to handle, so your brain is looking at everything and processing all the information all the time. And so that's why a cluttered environment can also bring you more anxiety, because there's just too much stuff. So in that regard, so it would be good for you to create this calm environment, not only in terms of like detoxing the distractions, but also creating an environment that it's more clutter-free. And by clutter, I can also mention things that like the news or anything that is feeding your mind with irrelevant information. And a side note here about the news: obviously it's good to be updated about the world, but it's probably better if you choose one way to update yourself about the world, instead of just being bombarded with all the news and all the kind of things, terrible things that are happening in the world all the time. And choose one way to get updated, so that you can also filter a lot of the stuff that is irrelevant for your life. Also, when it comes to dealing with specific situations, visualization really, really works. So to visualize that you're going to be able to accomplish something can really, really tell your brain that, look, this is possible, and this is how I will feel. And I think I've mentioned in this video or the other that the brain doesn't distinguish between imagination, visualization and reality. So when you are visualizing, it is as if you are living that. So when you visualize, for example, doing that thing that you're dreading to do, then you're telling your brain, oh look, it is actually possible to do this thing and feel calm and alright. So when you are actually in that place, your brain is already more familiar with it. It can feel much more comfortable. Another thing that I could not mention is meditation. Meditation is a wonderful way to give your brain a break. It's probably my favorite way to practice this, because it also strengthens your brain's ability to deal with challenges. So for example, if it is a challenge for you to sit still for, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, when you put yourself through that situation, you're actually telling your brain it is okay to stay focused and calm even through this discomfort, because let's face it, especially when you start meditating, sitting still can be incredibly hard, even if it sounds weird to say that, but it is true, because your mind is just not used to being still. Your mind wants to be doing things, wants to be handling the outside world. So when you sit down and you close your eyes and you force yourself to be still, your mind can really be struggling in there and creating that discomfort that will make you ultimately go up and give up the task, if we consider meditation a task. In this case, I am considering meditation an activity. So it is really interesting, and I mean the positive effects of meditation have been widely explored, researched, and proven that there is a lot of benefit into when you meditate. There's a lot of benefits to your life, to your brain, and it's a practice. I will not talk much more about it, but it's a practice that I highly recommend. That will be it for today's video. We talked about how the brain can be trained, how anxiety works in the brain, how your environment influences your anxiety, and also some practical tips for you to handle anxiety in your life. I wonder, was there anything in this video that stood up to you as most interesting? If so, I would say take a moment to think, to reflect around what you can do or undo about that situation that kind of like rang the bell for you in this video. And join me next week. Next week I will be talking about how to be less self-conscious, if that is something that interests you. See you then!